I want to talk to you about a message that I'm just calling 2022, We're All In. This is whether we like it or not, here it comes. And what do we do with it? How do we as Christians function like this? Um, I suppose as your pastor, I should have started off with the joke. It's been like, I haven't seen you guys since last year, those sort of corny jokes. And like yesterday, I saw nobody post it, so I just went ahead and did it. Seems like yesterday, was 2021. And whatever the case may be, I'm sure you've noticed that each year, almost all the major news magazines put out an issue with special pictorial sections, memorials, and what a shame that we lost Betty White. Isn't that? 99 years old, 18, 19 days away from her 100th birthday and all of that. And we see everything that happened in 2021 through the news, through memorials, through, there's different specials that come on. And we lost John Madden, and Fox News or Fox Sports put something together in honor of him. And it was just a really sad moment that we're losing people like this. But yet, we move forward, and so here we are, first Sunday of 2022, and I wonder how we'll do this year. That's one of the questions I think about as a church, as individuals. How are we going to do? Some of us go into it with great excitement. Others, they go into it with a limp. They've lost people. Things have happened in life. But will we be busy? Will we make any better use of our time? In the, what is it now, 362 days, 363 days that remain in this year? How are we going to do with that? What are we going to do with our time? On an individual level, as a family, as a church, where do we go from here? Will we be looking back with joy, or will there be regret as another year goes by? So we'll be looking at the future with anticipation, or do we look at it with dread? I can tell you that I've ended my emails with this before to this church, but I think Radiant Fellowship's best days are ahead. And I think that is, I'm not just saying that. I'm not just saying, our best days are ahead and now we just maintain the same. No. I see, potentially the Rock expanding into serving not only at the Wapaka Hotel, but maybe I'm going to speak to one of the attorneys that owns the Firehouse Apartments. Maybe we'll start doing something there in that lobby as well, as that's very, very low-income housing as well. And, serving people there and being there for them. I see some really cool things happening in the programming of this church. And I'm just very optimistic of what it looks like. And I'm optimistic in general. I know there's pessimists and there's optimists, okay? And both make up the church body, okay? I totally get that. Pessimists are needed because you got to proceed with caution sometimes, okay? I am the type, and I think it was my mom told me this, and then it was confirmed by a shrink I had to see back in my high school days, that said, Bob, you're the type of person that jumps off a cliff, then wonders how you're going to land. And I'm like, yep, that sums me up pretty good. And it's true. In 6th grade, my friend Bill Dietrich and I, he had a 2-story garage, and we thought we could parachute this thing. And so we took pillowcases and proceeded, and got hurt severely. Didn't break anything, but we just laid there questioning our life choices and what life holds for us if we keep down this path. And it was the parachute deployed. It opened up, but, it just, the physics weren't there. So... But, I am that sort of person. And so it's good to have pessimists, but it's also good to have optimists as well, saying, what, despite everything that's going on, maybe in our city, state, national level, as a world, let's talk about it. It's kind of scary when Putin and Biden have a phone conversation these days, and Russia's stacking up the troops to do an invasion, and Putin a couple of days ago was pretty much like, you don't scare me. And so there's a lot of things going on in our world, like, okay, God, you're in control of this, because I promise you, Bob Adams from Wapaka, Wisconsin, isn't going to do jack squat regarding what's happening on the Russian border, okay? So what I can do is pray about it, okay? Because can God change Biden's heart? Can God change Putin's heart? Absolutely. I've read the story of the Damascus Road and how God got a hold of Paul. I believe it, okay? But at the same time, what can I do then as Bruce Wilkinson, author of the prayer of Jabez said, what can I do in my sphere of influence to make this place a better area to live, a better world to live in? Okay, and then what trickles down is I'm doing my part, and if this guest speaker bites on, then he's got a whole different sphere of influence than I have, but now we're working together. And then, and on a simplistic level, my sphere of influence is never going to hit, let's say, Tom's sphere of influence, because I don't work on fire trucks, okay? You wouldn't want me to. Today I'm going to attempt to put a light bar on my Kia. That's the extent of it, okay? But for Thomas, he works and he's got a whole nother sphere of influence. Sharon has a whole nother sphere of influence. And so if we all do our part, hey, 2022 is going to actually be all right, okay? It's going to be a good year for us. Ephesians 5:15 through 17. Now, I should stop for a minute. What I am doing in 2022 is ending my sermons differently, okay? I'm going to do a segment called One More Thing. Any Apple fans in here? Okay. Wow. Jeremy, are you noticing this? You're in the majority here. Anytime Steve Jobs would do a presentation of the latest thing, it was always like, oh, we were waiting for this one thing. And then he'd come back at the end after the credits scrolled and everything. He'd come back on the stage. He goes, oh, yeah, one more thing. And so I'm going to end my sermons that way. So what I'm doing during this time is, here's my thought about the Sunday sermon. I'm just going to be honest with you. It's boring, all right? A lot of times the way the pastors stick the landing, I'm just kind of done with it. It's kind of, you go on a talk, you talk about all these things and all of that, and then it's, it reminds me of the Jerry Springer show. It's like all of this stuff going on, then at the end of the show, Jerry Springer sits down and he's like, so what's the lesson we learned here today? You know, it's like, wow, place was just a zoo. People were throwing punches at Steve, the security guard, and now you're saying, so what did we learn here today? And I feel like I do that, and so I want to change it up to include you into my endings. So I'm doing a thing at the end of every sermon that's going to be called One More Thing. And this is where you guys can text me during the sermon. I don't mind. Shoot a Facebook message, shoot a text message, whatever you want to do. And then I'm going to address questions, to end the service and just kind of bring it all together. It can have everything to do with the sermon, or it can have just a question about the church or God or whatever you want, or what did you think about Spider-Man 2 or the latest Spider-Man? Nothing, because I saw Sing 2, okay? I went to go see this awesome movie, and now I'm singing elephants sing, okay? It was awful. No, it was good. The kids liked it. It was a good movie. Like I said, it was a good movie if you were expecting to see Sing 2, but I was expecting to see the web slinger himself, okay? So I will do that at the end of this sermon and do a one more thing here. So Ephesians chapter 5:15 through 17, and I should have used a brighter font, but anyways, we'll proceed. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Therefore, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. As we move into the new year, we need to remember this, that our time on this earth is limited. Whether we like it or not, it is, okay? One of the most melancholy, sad memes that I've ever seen on Facebook is, it showed a group of kids walking out the door to play. And it said, at some point in your life, if I can word this right, there was one day in your past where the final day of going out the door to play with your friends came and has gone now, okay? In other words, there was a day that no longer happened, and now it's just a memory in your past. You know, all your group would get together and go bike around the neighborhood, whatever it was. In Wauwatosa, we'd go to Mr. Balistreri's, or his son and their friends would come over to our house, would bike around the neighborhood, end up at the beer depot buying a soda and candy bar, or Sheely's if we really wanted to be adventurous down the road. And that was a regular daily occurrence. But at one point, that ended, and we all moved on and carried on to different paths in life. And in our life, our time on earth is limited. As we get older, we become more in tune with that. We realize, I can't run up the sled hill quite as fast as my kids can now at this point. We realize, okay, to get up from the floor after playing on the floor with the kids, that's becoming quite a chore, okay? we realize that more and more that things just aren't the same. And first of all, we must be very careful how we live because we are limited on how long we're going to be here. Psalms 39:4 says, "Show me, Lord, my life's end and the number of my days. Let me know how fleeting my life is." In Psalms 90, verse 10, it says, "Our days may come to 70 years or 80 if our strength endures, yet the best of them are but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away." And it's true. I mean, you think of, we've had friends and family that were in the end stages of life, and we realize how quickly that time goes. A lot of us, if you haven't been familiar with this term, but for those of us that have, when someone says they're going into hospice, you realize this is the end. And we realize that how quickly their life goes then at that point. But for a lot of us, we look back and, to be honest with you, you think of 1980. Don't think that's long ago, but it is a long time ago. 42 years ago, isn't that something? 1980. That was a long time ago. You talk to kids nowadays and they don't have a clue. Especially today, you start talking to teenagers about some funny movie scenes you saw. For some of us, you think of Napoleon Dynamite, okay? For the teen generation now, they're like, what is Napoleon Dynamite? It's really interesting. A lot of kids these days, all they know is 9/11 by the books that they may read or something that's popped up. They weren't even there. But for us, it's like, wait, that just happened. Oh, yeah, that happened 21 years ago. 21 years ago this September. And we realize, wow, things are going by very quickly. So what do we do with that? How do we deal with life that's moving faster and faster? Well, point number 2 is simply make the most of every opportunity. Secondly, Paul tells us that we must make the most of every opportunity, and he gives us a reason. And they very much apply to today. He says, because the days are evil. And they are. What used to be clear black and white is now blurred lines. What wasn't okay back then is now all of a sudden okay. We have TV shows that celebrate sinful lifestyles. We have things in our world that back even 5-10 years ago, it wasn't okay, but now it's the norm. Our time is a precious commodity, and so we got to think about, where do we want to invest our time? Where do we want to put our time? For me, I want to put my time into where things matter. On a personal level, that's why I'm jazzed to be over at Foundations for Living, because it lines up with what my heart is and what this church does. And so it's a joy to be a part of that. As a church, it's the reason why we became a women's shelter downstairs. It's the reason why we do outreaches, why we do Bible studies, why kids every Wednesday night invade this place. Because we want to be there. Some of the fondest memories that I've had growing up, I know Val and Jeremy as well, and others that maybe have been a part of a youth group, maybe watching online. Some of our fondest days were those youth events and kids' trips. And so I want to provide that for our kids' generation as well, so that when they look back at the church, they remember, oh, yeah, there's a big kid that works at Dunkin' Donuts. Kind of ogreish, actually. He was a little guy, though, when he was in Royal Rangers, and now Andrew was like, it's no wonder he played football in high school. Okay, but now he's a graduate. And I walked in there. I don't go there very often. Dunkin' Donuts. And I said, Andrew, do you remember this? And it was just 2 days after our Pinewood Derby race. I showed him the picture on my phone of the current group of Pinewood Derby racers. He's like, oh, my gosh. He goes, that feels just like yesterday. But actually, for him, it was about 8 years ago. And he goes, those were some of the funnest times of my childhood, was doing the Pinewood Derby races and launching rockets. And so for me as a pastor, it's like, I want to keep this train going for our kids to remember. For us as adults, we look back on moments that we had of fellowship times that we served together, our trips to Nashville, where the Dankeys tried to keep up with me on the highway. okay? And all of these moments where we realize, yeah, it was sweltering hot down there. Josh and Dennis, you guys lost a lot of weight in working on that bus down there. But we look back and we're thinking, missions trips just aren't for kids. They're for adults as well. And that's why we do these. In 2 months, it'll be a year since we went to the Ark Encounter as a church. And we loaded up in a big van and we just drove on down there. To build memories, to make the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Here's the deal. Good things can take away our time. I read an interview once about Oprah Winfrey. I don't know why. But it was an interesting conversation she had because someone approached her and said, why do you say no to so many good things, so many good projects out there? She said, I don't say no because they're a bad project. I don't say no because they're not doing any good. She goes, I say no because time is a commodity and I invest my time into what I know and what I want to invest in. And I will try to refer them over to other things. I think that's important for us as Christians. There's a lot of things vying for our attention. There's a lot of different directions we can go in. And to say no to something doesn't mean you think poorly of it. The great philosopher David Chappelle, okay, he had a Netflix special, and he came out and just said, I don't like the alternative lifestyles. Right away, homophobic, transphobic, blah, blah, blah. And it was literally one of those moments that we read about in Scripture where non-Christians were acting like Christians and Christians were acting like non-Christians. You ever read that part of the Bible? Story of Jonah. Check it out. Non-Christians were acting more like Christians. So Dave Chappelle said that. The world came at him. And who goes to bat for Dave Chappelle? Bill Maher. It's like, what's going on here? There's not one Christian stepping up for Dave Chappelle, but Bill Maher did. And he said, listen, just because you don't like something, you say no to something, doesn't mean you're phobic. Okay, it just means you don't like it. And like the movie, remember, the whole phobia phrase came out big time when John, what's his name? Help me out, the father from Roseanne. Dan Goodman comes out, and he played a little role in a movie that ends with phobia. Remember that one? Arachnophobia. And all of us that were younger watching in a dark room, and you're like, the EBGBs, fighters everywhere and stuff. And then all of a sudden you start hearing phobia, claustrophobia, homophobia, all these things. And just because Dave Chappelle says I don't like something, he goes, I'm not phobic about it. I'm not afraid. Because phobia means I'm afraid of it. I'm deathly afraid of something. There's even a phobia of cotton balls. You went to school with somebody afraid of cotton balls, didn't you, Jake? Yeah. And there's an actual phobia of cotton balls. And so that means, you know what, that you're literally afraid of it. And for us today to say, I don't agree with it, I don't like it, does not make you a phobic of it, okay? But the world's lost that. And so we give our time to things that, because we say no doesn't mean we hate it or phobic or anything like that. It just means I don't want to give my time to that, but I will certainly put a good word out there and feel free to get involved. But here's where I'm turning our attention to, because time is precious. We have families. We have lives. And so we focus in on what we can do, and we do it well. Bad things can take away our time. Social media can take away our time. But what if we put the zeal we put into social media into doing ministry and doing things for Christ? Jesus, we know the story. He went to the home of Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. He sat down to teach, and Mary was sitting at his feet, soaking in every word. Didn't care about the toys out in the living room. Didn't care about how the bathroom looked. Jesus is here. I'm going to go hang out with him. If you ever want your house clean really quick, I can just give you a call and say, hey, Pastor would like to do a visit with you. A lot of times it's funny how fast a home gets whipped into shape. And you don't have to. I'm totally okay. I have 3 crazies in my house. And no, there's 3, James, not 2. And remember my sermon, you point, there's 3 back at you. And it's okay. And so Martha took that approach. She just said, you know what? Jesus is here. I'm going to hang out. And so Martha was out in the kitchen preparing dinner. Now, you know the story. It's found in Luke 10. Martha gets upset because Mary is not in the kitchen, too. She complains to Jesus, Lord, don't you care more that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. And how did Jesus reply? Martha, Martha. 2 times he said Martha. Jesus answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what's better, and it will not be taken from her. It was in Luke chapter 10, verses 40 through 42. Our time is valuable. Put it where it's important. To be consumed with other things, to volunteer just to fill your schedule, that's fine, but do it with something that's going to add purpose to someone else's life, something that's going to bring purpose to your life. It's okay to say no. If a non-for-profit organization comes knocking on your door and says, can you get involved in that? You might think it's a great non-for-profit, but it's okay to say no. Because there are a lot of other people that can step up. And that just tells us, hey, your time is honed in here, and this is what you value. And so you're going to stick to this, like that interview that I read with Oprah. She said, so many good organizations out there, but this is where I can invest my time and interest, and I'm going to do my best to make these flourish. There's a lot of other people out there that can help make with those other ones. Now, was Martha committing a sin by fixing a meal in the kitchen? No, of course not. But here's the problem. She was so preoccupied with what she was doing that she didn't realize that God was in her living room. And so we have to focus our time to help people make a difference, because we don't want to be this person. It says, please don't ever allow yourself to become the person on the left. And that's very true. Help somebody out, do things that make a difference, and see how God uses it in this year ahead of us. There was a movie that came out quite a while ago that brought a phrase to the forefront. It's with Robin Williams. Why don't you watch this? Go ahead, Jeremy, with the video.
Now, Mr. Pitts. It's a rather unfortunate name. Mr. Pitts. Where are you? Mr. Pitts, will you open your hymnal to page 542? Read the first stanza of the poem you find there.
To the virgins to make much of time?
Yes, that's the one. Somewhat appropriate, isn't it?
Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Old time is still a-flying. And this same flower that smiles today, tomorrow will be dying.
Thank you, Mr. Pitts. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. The Latin term for that sentiment is carpe diem. Now, who knows what that means?
Carpe diem. That's seize the day.
Very good, Mr.
Meeks.
Meeks. Another unusual name. Seize the day. Gather ye rosebuds while ye may. Why does the writer use these lines?
Because he's in a hurry.
No. Ding! Thanks for playing anyway. Because we are food for worms, lads. Because believe it or not, each and every one of us in this room is one day going to stop breathing, turn cold, and die. I'd like you to step forward over here and peruse some of the faces from the past. You've walked past them many times, but I don't think you've really looked at them. They're not that different from you, are they? Same haircuts, full of hormones, just like you. Invincible, just like you feel. The world is their oyster. They believe they're destined for great things, just like many of you. Their eyes are full of hope, just like you. Did they wait until it was too late to make from their lives even one iota of what they were capable? Because you see, gentlemen, these boys are now fertilizing daffodils. But if you listen real close, you can hear them whisper their legacy to you. Go on, lean in. Listen. You hear it?
All right. So the phrase carpe diem came from that movie, and it was a very poignant topic to say, seize the day and make the most of it. So how do we do that? Well, it goes to point number 3. Understand what the Lord's will is. To answer that, Paul tells us, do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. Now, what do you think God's will is for you in this new year? Is it doing good, or is it worrying? Is it reaching out, or is it panicking? Is it dwelling on topics that you can't do anything about? Or is it saying, I'm going to do and make a difference in my life? So let me make a couple of suggestions for you to consider. First of all, establish your priorities. Number 1, God should be part of your life. But where does he stand in your priorities? Where does he stand in my priorities? You must also spend time with your family. That's a priority. Now, most of us have work to do, and I think Christians ought to be good workers. But when it's the same old thing year in and year out, it gets mundane. So what's the latter for? Well, there's a scene in Dead Poets Society where Professor Keaton gets up on his desk. And he says, sometimes if we just take a couple little steps, extra little steps, and change our point of view, life changes for us. And I can tell you right now, sitting up here preaching a message is way different. I feel like Robert Schuller at the Crystal Cathedral. But it's changed my perspective of the room. It's changed my outlook on this room just like that. And in our own lives, the fact of the matter is that if we keep doing things the same way, we're going to have the same perspective. But if all of a sudden we say, hey, Pastor Bob, when women start using our shelter again, can I volunteer for that? It's very uncomfortable. There's a lot of thoughts that go through my head when I came up here. What if I fall? That's on video. I promise you that'll show up on YouTube. There's a lot of apprehensions as to why it may not be a good idea for a pastor to do this. If I fall, I could get a hernia. I'm just saying. But the fact is, it changes the perspective. It's a little uncomfortable. It's a little unnerving. But at the same time, when you step out and do something different, your perspective changes. When I first moved to Wapaka, I thought I was living in Mayberry. But then I did a police ride along as the police chaplain. I realized I was on the set of Jerry Springer. Okay, why? Because it changed my perspective, but at the same time, it changed my focus as a church, saying, churches are doing these big, grandiose outreaches, and that's good and everything. They spend thousands of dollars, but why don't we just give away school supplies? Because that's really what's needed in our community. And so this scene in Dead Poets Society, Mr. Keating stands up on his desk, and everybody looks at him like, oh, you're crazy. This has never been done at Hilton before. And then all of a sudden, one by one, they stood up on their desk. Now, I'm not asking you to do that. But what I am challenging you is change your perspective. If things are the same way year in and year out, and there's not a whole lot has changed, but you want to make a difference for God, change your perspective. I think that's very important for us to do in order to understand what it is God has for us. So let's make 2022 a very good year, an important year, a year of change. I can promise you as your pastor, if this guest speaker comes through and other things that God's been laying on my heart to do, it's going to be a year of change for our church. It'll be a year of bringing hope to this community and onward and onward and onward. But I would encourage you to get involved with those things, but also for you, what's the change for you this year? Let's have the worship team come on up. Ushers, if you would as well. We're going to take the offering.